A German Shepherd stared at an abandoned house every single day, and what a single mom found inside made her cry. At first, it seemed strange, just a loyal old dog, frozen in place, eyes locked on broken windows and boarded doors. But the truth was darker than anyone expected. When the mom dared to step inside, she found footprints where no one had walked for decades, and a photograph of a little girl who looked exactly like her daughter. Every room held a secret. Every letter told a story of love, war, and a family that vanished overnight. And the dog wasn't just staring, he was guarding something no one was supposed to forget. Now, one single discovery could change everything she thought she knew about her family, her past, and her future. But why did the dog refuse to look away? And what heartbreaking truth was hidden inside that house all along? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button. For more, a crisp autumn morning painted the neighborhood in shades of amber and gold. Emma Carter wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself as she stepped onto her front porch, the warmth from her coffee mug seeping into her chilled fingers. The steam from her drink curled up into the cool air as she watched her 8-year-old daughter, Lily, bouncing from foot to foot at the end of their driveway. "Do you think Ms. Peterson will like my art project?" Lily called out, her backpack decorated with colorful pins jingling with each movement. "Of course she will, sweetie. You worked so hard on it," Emma replied, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. The morning sun caught Lily's auburn hair, so much like her own, making it glow like polished copper. Movement across the street caught Emma's attention. Through the morning mist, she spotted Rex, the old German Shepherd from next door, sitting perfectly still at the edge of the overgrown yard belonging to number 37 Maple Street. The abandoned house had been empty for as long as Emma could remember, its weathered facade a stark contrast to the well-maintained homes surrounding it. Rex's posture was unusual, alert, yet frozen, his ears perked forward and his eyes fixed intently on the dark windows of the house. Emma had always known him as Mr. Harris's friendly, energetic dog, but this behavior seemed different. "Lily, honey, has Rex been sitting there long?" Emma asked, taking a careful sip of her coffee. Lily turned to look, her small face scrunching in thought. "He was there when I came outside. He didn't even wag his tail when I called to him." The school bus's familiar rumble approached their street. Emma descended the porch steps, walking Lily to the curb as she did every morning. "Have a wonderful day at school, sweetheart," she said, giving her daughter a quick hug. As the yellow bus pulled away, Emma's gaze returned to Rex. The old dog hadn't moved an inch. His gray-flecked muzzle pointed steadfastly at the abandoned house's second-story windows. There was something unsettling about his unwavering focus. Throughout the day, Emma found herself checking on Rex from her home office window. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, and while she should have been focusing on her latest project, her attention kept drifting to the peculiar scene across the street. Hour after hour, Rex maintained his vigil. By late afternoon, concern had gotten the better of her. Emma crossed the street, approaching Rex carefully. "Hey buddy," she called softly. "Everything okay?" The German Shepherd's ears twitched at her voice, but his eyes remained locked on the house. Up close, Emma could see the gray around his muzzle more clearly, reminding her that Rex wasn't a young dog anymore. She noticed he had a water bowl beside him. Mr. Harris must have brought it out. The abandoned house loomed before them, its windows like hollow eyes staring back. Thick ivy crawled up the Victorian-style walls, and the once beautiful garden had become a jungle of overgrown bushes and weeds. The property had always given Emma an odd feeling, but seeing Rex's strange behavior made it feel more pronounced. When Lily returned from school, she immediately noticed Rex was still in the same spot. "Mom, is Rex sick?" she asked, worry clear in her young voice. "I don't think so, sweetie. Mr. Harris says he's just being a little weird today." "Sometimes dogs do that," Emma assured her, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. The evening progressed with their usual routine: homework, dinner, and their special mother-daughter reading time. But even as they went about their normal activities, Emma felt distracted by the mystery across the street. After tucking Lily into bed with an extra tight hug and 2 bedtime stories, Emma found herself drawn to her living room window. The night had settled in fully now, and the moon cast its pale light over the quiet street. Her breath caught as she pulled back the curtain. Rex was still there, his form illuminated by the moonlight, as still as a statue. The old German Shepherd's silhouette seemed almost ghostly in the night, his unwavering vigilance taking on an almost supernatural quality. The abandoned house's windows appeared even darker against the moonlit facade, like black mirrors reflecting nothing. Emma stood at her window for several long moments, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. In all her years of living in the neighborhood, she had never seen anything quite like this. There was something about Rex's dedication to whatever he was watching that sent a shiver down her spine. She thought about calling Mr. Harris again, but what would she say? The dog had water, wasn't in any apparent distress, and was simply watching. Yet something about this scene felt significant, as if Rex knew something that the rest of them didn't. The moonlight cast long shadows across the overgrown yard, and for a moment Emma thought she saw movement in one of the house's windows. But when she blinked and looked again, there was nothing but darkness. Still, Rex sat motionless, his eyes fixed on that same spot. guarding or waiting for something that Emma couldn't begin to understand. She realized she had been holding her breath and slowly let it out. Her hand pressed against the cool glass of her window. The night was quiet except for the distant sound of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves in the autumn breeze. Yet the silence felt heavy with unspoken questions, all centered on that old house and the faithful dog who refused to look away from its dark windows. The autumn afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Emma guided her small blue sedan into the parking lot of Harris's General Store. The familiar bell above the door chimed as she and Lily stepped inside, the scent of freshly ground coffee and warm bread enveloping them. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath their feet, a sound that had welcomed townspeople for over 50 years. "Can I look at the candy aisle, Mom?" Lily asked, her eyes already drifting toward the colorful display of sweets near the back of the store. Emma smiled, smoothing her daughter's dark hair. "Just looking, sweetie. We're here for groceries today." Mr. Harris stood behind the ancient cash register, his weathered hands carefully counting change for Mrs. Peterson, who was buying her usual Wednesday afternoon items. His silver hair caught the light streaming through the dusty front windows, and his wire-rimmed glasses sat low on his nose. Though he must have been well into his 70s, he still worked 6 days a week, knowing every customer by name and their preferred brands of coffee. While Lily wandered down the candy aisle, Emma gathered their needed items: bread, milk, eggs, and some fresh vegetables from the small produce section. Her mind kept drifting back to Rex, the German shepherd who hadn't moved from his vigil at the abandoned house. There was something unsettling about his unwavering focus, something that made her wonder about the story behind those empty windows and overgrown yard. As she approached the counter with her basket, Mr. Harris greeted her with his usual warm smile. "Afternoon, Emma. Found everything you needed today?" "Yes, thank you." She placed her items on the counter, watching as his practiced hands began scanning them. After a moment's hesitation, she added, "Mr. Harris, I was wondering if you could tell me about that old house on Cedar Street, the one across from mine?" The change was immediate. Mr. Harris's hands stilled, and his typically cheerful expression clouded over. He glanced around the store, though they were the only customers present besides Lily, who was still occupied with the candy display. "The Callahan place." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "That's not a story for a pleasant afternoon conversation. Emma, please." Emma pressed gently. "I've noticed the neighbor's dog Rex. He spends all his time staring at that house. There must be some history there." Mr. Harris sighed, removing his glasses and cleaning them with the edge of his apron, a nervous habit Emma had noticed before when difficult subjects came up. It was the Callahan family's home, back in the day. Beautiful place. It was too when Sarah Callahan kept her garden blooming and little Clara would play in the front yard. He paused, replacing his glasses and looking at Emma with an intensity that made her straighten her spine. "But they disappeared one night. Just vanished. No warning, no explanation. Left everything behind. Clothes in the closets, dishes in the sink, car in the garage. Some folks say they heard a child crying that night, but by morning, they were gone." Emma felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm store. When was this? Must be going on 40 years now. Mr. Harris began bagging her groceries with deliberate movements. Police investigated, of course, searched the house top to bottom, never found a thing to explain it. After a while, people stopped asking questions. Some things are better left alone. "Emma," Lily called from the candy aisle, "can I get just one piece? Please." "Just a minute, honey," Emma called back, then turned to Mr. Harris. "But surely someone must know something. The neighbors? Maybe." Mr. Harris's face grew even more serious. "Listen to me, Emma. That house, it's got shadows that run deep. Best to keep your distance. Some places hold on to their secrets for a reason." He leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "Stay away from there. Keep your little girl away too. Nothing good comes from stirring up old ghosts." Emma wanted to ask more questions, but Lily appeared at her side, clutching a chocolate bar. The look in Mr. Harris's eyes made it clear the conversation was over. She paid for their groceries, including Lily's treat, and guided her daughter toward the door. "Thank you, Mr. Harris," she said, pausing at the threshold. He nodded solemnly. "Remember what I said, Emma. Some doors are better left closed." The drive home was quiet, with Emma lost in thought about the Callahans. Lily hummed softly in the back seat, contentedly nibbling her chocolate. As they turned onto Cedar Street, Emma's eyes were immediately drawn to the abandoned house and to Rex. The German shepherd hadn't moved from his position. His black and tan coat gleamed in the late afternoon sun. But there was something about his posture that made Emma's breath catch. His body was rigid, alert, every muscle tense, as if waiting for something or someone. His eyes remained fixed on the house's dark windows, unwavering and intense. Emma pulled into her driveway, Mr. Harris's warning echoing in her mind. As she helped Lily gather the grocery bags, she couldn't shake the feeling that Rex knew something about the house's secrets, something that had kept him standing guard for all these hours, waiting with a patience that seemed almost supernatural. Looking at the old house now, with its peeling paint and shuttered windows, Emma could almost imagine the echoes of a child's laughter, the ghost of Sarah Callahan's garden, and the mystery of that night 40 years ago when a family simply vanished into thin air. Rex remained motionless, his vigil unbroken, as if he alone held the key to the house's dark secrets. Emma stood at her front door, watching the yellow school bus disappear around the corner with Lily safely aboard. Her heart thumped against her ribs as she turned to face the abandoned house across the street. Rex wasn't in his usual spot this morning, but his absence only made the old Callahan place seem more ominous. The morning sun did little to soften the house's forbidding appearance. Emma wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself. More from nerves than the autumn chill, Mr. Harris's warning from yesterday echoed in her mind. Stay away from that place. But something deeper than curiosity pulled at her. Taking a deep breath, Emma stepped off her porch and crossed the street. Each step on the cracked sidewalk felt heavier than the last. Up close, the house loomed even larger than it appeared from across the street. 2 stories of weathered clapboard siding rose before her, with darkness lurking behind every boarded window. Thick stems of ivy twisted up the walls like gnarled fingers, forcing their way between the wooden slats. The front yard was a tangle of overgrown grass and weeds that reached past her knees. Emma skirted around the edge of the property, keeping close to the neighbor's well-maintained fence. She noticed small details she couldn't see from across the street. A rusty tricycle half buried in weeds, faded shutters hanging crooked from upstairs windows, paint peeling away in long strips like shed skin. As she rounded the corner of the house, movement caught her eye. Her heart jumped, but it was just a plastic bag caught in one of the overgrown bushes, dancing in the morning breeze. The backyard was equally neglected, with an ancient swing set slowly rusting away in what might have once been a vegetable garden, now just a patch of tangled weeds. Emma's boots crunched on dead leaves as she approached the back of the house. Here, a small covered porch sagged beneath the weight of years of neglect. The screens had long since torn away, leaving just the skeletal wooden frames. A stack of ancient newspapers sat yellowing in one corner, their headlines too faded to read. The back door stood slightly ajar, moving almost imperceptibly in the wind. Each small movement produced a low creaking sound that made the hair on Emma's arms stand up. She stood frozen for a moment, listening. The normal sounds of the neighborhood seemed distant now. The bark of a dog, a car passing, someone's wind chimes, all muffled as if she'd stepped into another world. Fighting down her rising anxiety, Emma climbed the 3 wooden steps to the back porch. Each one groaned under her weight, but held. The peeling paint on the door revealed layers of colors underneath: green, then blue, then white, like geological strata marking different eras of the house's history. Emma hesitated at the threshold, her hand hovering near the door. What was she doing here? This was trespassing, wasn't it? But the house had been abandoned for decades, according to Mr. Harris, and something about Rex's vigil, his unwavering attention to this place, tugged at her instincts. Gathering her courage, Emma pushed the door open wider. It moved with surprising ease, swinging inward to reveal a dim kitchen. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light that penetrated through gaps in the boarded windows. The air inside was stale and thick with the musty smell of abandonment. Emma fumbled in her pocket for her phone and switched on its flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating an old-fashioned kitchen frozen in time. Cabinets with peeling paint lined the walls, their doors hanging askew. A heavy cast-iron sink stood beneath a window, and Emma could make out the shape of an ancient refrigerator in one corner. She took a tentative step inside, then another. The linoleum floor was covered in a thick layer of dust. Except, Emma's breath caught in her throat as her flashlight beam revealed something on the floor. The dust had been disturbed, creating a clear trail across the kitchen floor. Moving closer, Emma crouched down for a better look. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the phone steady. They're perfectly preserved in the dust. Were footprints? Small footprints, the size that might be made by a child's shoes. They led from the back door, through the kitchen, and toward what appeared to be a doorway into the rest of the house. Emma followed the beam of her flashlight as it traced the path of the footprints. They continued into what must have been the front room of the house, the wooden floorboards now replacing the kitchen's linoleum. The prints remained clear in the undisturbed dust, leading toward a wide staircase that ascended into darkness. Emma stood motionless, her flashlight fixed on those small footprints. The creak of the back door and the wind was the only sound in the heavy silence. Questions tumbled through her mind. How recent were these prints? Had some neighborhood kid broken in to explore? Or was there something more to Rex's strange behavior, something that connected to these ghostly impressions in the dust? The beam of her flashlight trembled slightly as she traced the path of the footprints one more time, leading away from where she stood and up toward the darkened staircase. Emma's heart pounded as she followed the small footprints up the creaking staircase. Each step seemed to groan under her weight, stirring up clouds of dust that danced in the thin beams of light filtering through the cracks in the boarded windows. The trail led her down a narrow hallway, wallpaper peeling away in long, curled strips like autumn leaves. She paused at the doorway of what appeared to be a child's bedroom. Thick cobwebs draped the corners like ghostly curtains, their silvery strands catching what little light penetrated the gloom. The room held the musty smell of abandonment, that peculiar mix of old wood, dust, and forgotten memories. A delicate china doll sat crooked on a shelf, its porcelain face streaked with grime. Beside it, a collection of worn books stood at attention, their spines faded beyond recognition. Emma's eyes swept across the room, taking in every detail. The pale blue walls now gray with age, the wooden rocking horse frozen mid-gallop, and a small desk where someone once did homework or wrote in diaries. On the nightstand next to an iron-framed bed, something caught her attention. Emma stepped closer, her shoes leaving prints in the thick dust that carpeted the floor. A picture frame lay face up, its glass webbed with cracks that spread like winter frost across a window pane. With trembling fingers, she lifted it, using the sleeve of her sweater to gently wipe away years of accumulated dust. Her breath caught in her throat. The photograph beneath the cracked glass showed a little girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, her face bright with joy as she hugged a German Shepherd puppy to her chest. The dog's ears were too big for its head, its paws oversized in that endearing way of growing puppies. But it was the girl's face that made Emma's hands shake so badly she nearly dropped the frame. The resemblance was uncanny, almost impossible. The girl in the photo could have been Lily's twin, the same heart-shaped face, the same slight tilt to her eyes, even the way her nose crinkled when she smiled. It was all Lily. But this photo had to be at least 30 years old. Judging by the yellowed edges and the style of the girl's dress, Emma sank onto the edge of the bed, sending up a cloud of dust that made her cough. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the photograph. The German Shepherd puppy could it be? Was this Rex as a puppy? But that was impossible. No dog could live that long. Yet something about the markings, the distinctive pattern around the dog's eyes. She jumped at a sudden noise downstairs, her heart leaping into her throat. After a few seconds of tense listening, she realized it was just the old house settling. Still, it broke whatever spell the photograph had cast over her. Emma carefully placed the frame in her bag, unable to leave this piece of mystery behind. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emma went through the motions of her normal routine. Laundry, cleaning, preparing dinner, but her mind kept returning to the photograph. She picked Lily up from school at 3 o'clock, studying her daughter's face with new eyes as the girl chatted about her day. Now, sitting across from Lily at their small kitchen table, Emma could barely focus on her meal. The resemblance that had shocked her in the bedroom seemed even more pronounced in the warm light of their dining room. Lily spooned up her chicken soup, telling a story about something funny that happened at recess, completely unaware of her mother's distraction. Emma watched as Lily tucked her hair behind her ear, exactly the same gesture as the girl in the photograph. The way she scrunched up her nose when she laughed at her own joke, identical. Even the small dimple that appeared in her left cheek was a perfect match. "Mom, are you okay?" Lily asked, pausing with her spoon halfway to her mouth. "You're looking at me funny." Emma forced a smile, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just thinking about how grown-up you're getting." The words felt hollow in her mouth. But Lily seemed satisfied with the answer and returned to her soup. But Emma couldn't stop staring. Who was that little girl in the photograph? What had happened to her? And why did she look so exactly like Lily that they could have been the same person? The questions swirled in her mind like autumn leaves caught in a wind, leading her thoughts down darker paths. Mr. Harris's warning about the Callahan family who had disappeared overnight took on new meaning. The soup grew cold in Emma's bowl as she watched her daughter eat, the mystery of the abandoned house and its long-ago inhabitants weighing heavily on her mind. Whatever had happened in that house, whatever secrets lay hidden in its dusty rooms and behind its boarded windows, Emma knew she couldn't ignore them anymore. Not when they seemed to be somehow connected to her own daughter in ways she couldn't begin to understand. Lily continued chattering about her day, but Emma's thoughts remained fixed on the cracked photograph in her bag and the impossible questions it raised. The resemblance was more than coincidence. It had to be. But what did it mean? The answer felt just out of reach, like trying to grasp smoke with her bare hands. The moon cast long shadows across Emma's bedroom window as she sat in her reading chair, unable to sleep. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the photograph she'd found earlier that day. The little girl who looked so much like Lily. A movement outside caught her eye, pulling her from her reverie. Through the window, she spotted Rex's familiar silhouette moving with purpose across the overgrown lawn. Emma pressed closer to the glass, watching as the old German Shepherd approached the abandoned house. To her surprise, Rex didn't take his usual sentinel position. Instead, he squeezed through a broken panel near the foundation, disappearing into the darkness within. Her heart raced. After everything she'd seen today, she couldn't ignore this. Emma grabbed her phone, switching on its flashlight function, and pulled on her worn tennis shoes. She crept downstairs, careful not to wake Lily, and slipped out the back door. The night air felt crisp against her skin as she crossed the street. Dried leaves crunched beneath her feet, making her wince at each step. The abandoned house loomed before her, somehow more imposing in the darkness. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she approached the broken panel where Rex had entered. "This is crazy," she whispered to herself, but dropped to her knees anyway. The opening was bigger than it had appeared from across the street. Emma shined her light inside, revealing bare floorboards and cobwebs. Taking a deep breath, she wiggled through the gap, trying to ignore the way the splintered wood caught at her jacket. Inside, dust motes swirled in her flashlight beam. The musty smell was stronger at night, mixed with the damp scent of rotting wood. A soft scratching sound came from deeper within the house. Emma swept her light across the floor, catching sight of fresh paw prints in the dust. "Rex," she called softly, following the trail. Her voice seemed to be swallowed by the darkness around her. A quiet whine answered from the direction of the staircase. Emma's beam caught Rex's reflective eyes. He stood at the base of the stairs, tail wagging slowly. Instead of leading her up as she expected, Rex moved to the side, nosing at something beneath the staircase. Emma approached cautiously, noting how the dog's behavior seemed deliberate, almost human-like in its purpose. As she drew closer, she noticed a small door set into the wall under the stairs, a crawl space. The door was ajar, and Rex pawed at it insistently. "What is it, boy?" Emma knelt beside him, running a hand over his coarse fur. Rex pushed his nose against her arm, then looked meaningfully at the crawl space. The message was clear. He wanted her to look inside. The opening was small, barely big enough for an adult to squeeze through. Emma played her light into the space, revealing bare earth floor and rough wooden walls. Something caught the beam near the back, the corner of what looked like an old cardboard box. Her curiosity overcame her hesitation. Emma got down on her hands and knees, crawling forward into the space. Cobwebs brushed against her face, and she tried not to think about what might be lurking in the darkness around her. The box was just within reach. Emma pulled it toward her, noting how Rex had positioned himself to watch through the doorway, his eyes alert and attentive. The box was heavy, covered in a thick layer of dust that made her sneeze. She carefully lifted it and backed out of the crawl space. Setting it down on the floor, Emma brushed away years of dust and grime. It was an old shoebox, the cardboard soft with age. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid. Inside, she found a collection of children's toys, a small teddy bear with matted fur, a collection of marbles that had lost their shine, and a worn jump rope coiled like a sleeping snake. Beneath these lay a stack of letters, yellowed with age and tied together with a faded blue ribbon. But what made her breath catch was the photograph lying on top. It was the same image she'd found upstairs in the bedroom, but this version was clearer, protected by the box all these years. The little girl's face was more distinct now, her smile bright as she hugged the German Shepherd puppy. Emma could see details she'd missed before. The girl's freckles, the pattern on her dress, the distinct markings on the puppy that looked so similar to Rex's own. Rex moved closer, pressing against Emma's side as she examined the contents. His posture was protective, watchful, as though these objects were precious treasures he'd been guarding all along. Emma's hands shook as she realized the significance of what she'd found. This wasn't just a random collection of memorabilia. These were personal belongings, carefully preserved and hidden away. And somehow, Rex had known exactly where they were. The old dog's eyes never left the box, his body tense with an almost palpable sense of purpose. Emma glanced between Rex and the photograph, wondering what connection this faithful animal had to the mysteries of this house and its long-vanished inhabitants. Sunlight streamed through Emma's living room windows as she settled onto her couch. The box of letters from the abandoned house placed carefully on her coffee table. With Lily safely at school, she finally had time to dive into these mysterious pieces of the past. Her hands trembled slightly as she untied the faded ribbon holding the bundle together. The first letter was dated April 15, 1945. The paper was delicate, yellowed with age, but the handwriting remained clear, elegant cursive, in faded blue ink. Emma adjusted her position on the couch and began to read. "My dearest Catherine, the war continues to keep us apart, but I promise you, my darling daughter, we will be together again soon. Your father's sacrifice weighs heavy on my heart, but I know he would want us to be brave. Keep faith. Once this terrible conflict ends, I will come for you. Until then, stay safe with Aunt Margaret." Emma's throat tightened as she moved through the letters chronologically. Each one told another piece of a heartbreaking story, a widowed mother forced to send her daughter away during wartime, writing regularly with promises of reunion and better days ahead. The mother, who signed each letter simply as CM, wrote with such tender devotion that Emma found herself wiping away tears. As the morning wore on, Emma discovered more details. The mother had been working in a munitions factory, trying to earn enough money to create a stable home for her daughter's return. She wrote about the little house she'd bought, the very one Emma had found these letters in, describing how she was fixing it up room by room, making it perfect for when Catherine came home. The later letters grew more desperate in tone. "My dearest Catherine, why haven't you written back? Your Aunt Margaret says you received my letters, but I haven't heard from you in months. Please, just a few lines to let me know you're all right." Emma's hands shook as she opened the final letter, dated December 1946, well after the war had ended. "My precious daughter, I've visited Aunt Margaret's home 3 times now, only to find you vanished without a trace. Where have you gone? The police say there's nothing they can do. You're simply listed as missing. I'll never stop searching for you, never stop hoping. This house will always be waiting for your return, just as I will always be waiting for you. All my love, Mother." CM. Emma sat back, her mind swimming with questions. What had happened to young Catherine? Why had she disappeared? The letters painted a picture of a mother's unwavering love, but provided no answers about the daughter's fate. looking around her living room for a moment of respite from the emotional weight of the letters. Emma's eyes fell on the old quilt draped across the back of her couch. It had belonged to her father, one of the few possessions she'd kept after his passing 3 years ago. He'd always been oddly protective of it, never letting her wash it or even move it from its place on his favorite chair. Something about the quilt tugged at her memory now. Emma stood up, walking over to examine it more closely. The fabric was worn but still sturdy, the pattern a traditional 9-patch design in faded blues and creams. As she ran her fingers along the border, she noticed something she'd never paid attention to before: tiny, nearly invisible stitches in one corner. Her heart nearly stopped as she made out the carefully embroidered initials. CM. Emma stared at the letters, then back at the pile of correspondence on her coffee table. The same initials that had signed each of those heartbreaking letters now stared back at her from her father's treasured quilt. Her mind raced with implications, possibilities she'd never considered before flooding her thoughts. With trembling fingers, she picked up the last letter again, comparing the handwriting to what she remembered of her father's. The style was different, but something about the way certain letters were formed seemed strangely familiar. She shut the letter carefully, her eyes drawn back to the quilt and those 2 simple initials that suddenly held so much meaning. CM, the town library, stood like a weathered sentinel at the end of Maple Street, its red brick facade warm in the morning sun. Emma clutched her folder of documents, the letters, newspaper clippings, and that haunting photograph as she climbed the worn stone steps. Lily skipped alongside her, humming a tune from her favorite cartoon. The air smelled of old books and wood polish. Mrs. Clark, the local historian, sat at her desk near the reference section, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as Emma approached, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Mrs. Carter," she said warmly, rising to greet them. "And this must be Lily. I've heard so much about you both from Mr. Harris at the grocery store." Lily gave a shy wave before wandering off to explore the children's section. Leaving Emma alone with the historian, Mrs. Clark gestured to a quiet study room off to the side. "Shall we?" They settled at a small table where Emma carefully laid out her findings. Mrs. Clark's eyes widened as she examined the letters and photographs. "The Callahan house," she breathed. "I haven't seen these documents before. May I?" Emma nodded, watching as the older woman's fingers traced the handwriting with reverence. Minutes ticked by as Mrs. Clark absorbed the contents, occasionally making small sounds of recognition or dismay. "This confirms what we suspected," Mrs. Clark finally said. Looking up, "Thomas Callahan never returned from the Pacific Theater. His wife Margaret waited 4 years. But," she shook her head sadly, "the telegram came in 19... missing in action, presumed dead." Emma leaned forward. "And their daughter, Clara." Mrs. Clark's expression grew troubled. "That's where things get complicated. I've researched this family extensively, but the records simply stop. Clara attended our local elementary school until age 10, then nothing. No transfer papers, no forwarding address." She adjusted her glasses. "There were whispers, of course. Small towns run on whispers." "What kind of whispers?" Emma asked, her throat tight. "Some said Margaret had a breakdown after Thomas's death. Others claimed Clara was sent to live with relatives out of state." Mrs. Clark's voice dropped lower. "But no one knew for certain. Margaret became increasingly reclusive, and then one day, they were both just gone." Emma glanced through the doorway at Lily, who sat cross-legged in the children's section, absorbed in a picture book. The letters mentioned promises of reunion, like they were separated against their will. "That would match the timeline," Mrs. Clark confirmed, pulling out a thick binder of local records. "See here. Clara's last school attendance was October 12, 1945. The very next day, she's marked absent, and never returns." A chill ran down Emma's spine despite the warm library air. "And Margaret stayed in the house another 6 months, according to utility records. Then she too disappeared." Mrs. Clark hesitated. "Emma, there's something else. The address listed for Clara's emergency contact, it's a sanitarium. That closed decades ago." Emma's hands clenched involuntarily. "A sanitarium? For children? For anyone who needed to be removed from society?" Mrs. Clark's voice was heavy with implication. It wasn't uncommon in those days, especially for grief-stricken families. They spent the next hour poring over records, birth certificates, school documents, even Old Town Council minutes. But after Clara's disappearance, the trail went cold. It was as if mother and daughter had vanished into thin air, leaving only those heartbreaking letters behind. As they wrapped up their research, Mrs. Clark placed a gentle hand on Emma's arm. "Whatever happened to that family, it left a shadow over this town. People preferred to forget rather than face the possibility that something terrible happened to that little girl." Emma gathered her materials, her mind spinning. "Thank you for your help," she said sincerely. "At least now we know part of the story." "Be careful, Emma," Mrs. Clark cautioned. "Some mysteries are buried for a reason." The drive home was quiet, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the road. Emma's thoughts kept returning to those letters, to the desperate mother promising reunion with her daughter. In the rearview mirror, she could see Lily had fallen asleep, her head resting against the window. dark hair falling across her face. That's when it hit her. The realization that made her grip the steering wheel tighter. The quilt at home with its mysterious CM initials. The uncanny resemblance between Lily and the girl in the photograph. The German Shepherd's unwavering vigil. Could this decades-old mystery be somehow connected to her own family? A cold shiver ran through Emma as she glanced again at her sleeping daughter. The pieces were there, waiting to be assembled, but the picture they might form filled her with equal parts dread and desperate curiosity. The late afternoon light caught the dust motes swirling in the car, and for a moment, Emma felt suspended between past and present, between the known and unknown. The weight of untold stories pressed in around her, and she knew with certainty that she couldn't stop now, not until she understood how her own family's thread might be woven into this tapestry of loss and separation. The evening sun cast long shadows through the living room windows as Emma sat on the worn sofa, still processing everything she'd learned from Mrs. Clark. Her fingers traced the faded pattern of the old family quilt draped across her lap, the very same one that had belonged to her father. The house was quiet except for the gentle humming of the dishwasher and Lily's footsteps padding down the hallway. "Mom." Lily appeared in the doorway, holding something small and white between her fingers. "Remember when I was playing with the quilt last month? I found this inside it." She held out what appeared to be a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and slightly crumpled at the edges. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she took the note from her daughter's small hands. "Where exactly did you find this, sweetheart?" "It was tucked into one of the corners," Lily explained, climbing onto the sofa beside her mother. "I forgot about it until I saw you looking at the quilt just now with trembling fingers." Emma carefully unfolded the delicate paper. The handwriting jumped out at her immediately, the same elegant, flowing script she'd spent hours studying in the letters from the crawl space. Her breath caught in her throat as she began to read. "My dearest Clara, I'm leaving this note with the quilt I made for you. Remember that every stitch carries my love, just as every star in the sky watches over you. No matter where life takes you, wrap yourself in this quilt and know that my arms are around you. Love." Mama C. Emma's vision blurred with tears. The connection she'd been searching for was literally woven into the fabric of her family's history. She spread the quilt out across their laps, examining it with new eyes. The pattern, which she'd always thought was just a simple array of stars, now seemed to hold deeper meaning. "Lily, do you see these tiny stitches here?" Emma pointed to a corner of the quilt where the initials CM were barely visible. "I always thought these were just random marks. But now?" She reached for the stack of letters she'd brought home, pulling out one dated from the summer of 19. The handwriting was identical, the same distinctive curve to the C, the same flourish on the M. Her hands began to shake as pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. "Mom." Lily's voice was soft with concern. "Are you okay?" Emma wrapped an arm around her daughter, pulling her close. "I'm fine, sweetie. I'm just thinking." Her mind was racing, connecting dots she'd never seen before. Her own mother had always been vague about their family history, saying only that Emma's grandmother had passed away before Emma was born. She thought about the photograph from the abandoned house, the little girl who looked so much like Lily, holding that German Shepherd puppy, the dates on the letters, the missing Callahan daughter, the quilt that had been passed down through her family. "Oh my God," Emma whispered, her free hand covering her mouth. The truth hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her grandmother, the woman she'd never met, but who had given birth to Emma's mother, must have been Clara Callahan, the lost little girl from the letters. Lily snuggled closer, sensing her mother's emotional turmoil. "What is it, Mom?" Emma stared at the note, then at the letters, then at the quilt that had traveled through decades to reach them. Clara Callahan hadn't vanished into thin air as the townspeople believed. She had survived, grown up, and eventually had a daughter of her own, Emma's mother. The weight of this revelation settled over Emma like a heavy blanket. All those years of wondering about her family history, of feeling disconnected from her past. And here was the answer, preserved in carefully crafted stitches and loving words from a mother to her daughter. "The little girl in those old letters," Emma said slowly, her voice thick with emotion. "She was my grandmother. Your great-grandmother. She survived whatever happened here. Lily. She grew up and had my mom." Lily's eyes widened with wonder. "Really? So the lady who wrote these letters, she was my great-great-grandmother?" Emma nodded, running her fingers over the handwritten note once more. The mysteries of the abandoned house, Rex's vigilant watch, the hidden letters, everything was connected to her own family in ways she never could have imagined. Her grandmother had been Clara Callahan, the lost daughter who had somehow found her way to safety and built a new life, carrying with her only this quilt as a reminder of her mother's love. The truth felt both overwhelming and perfectly right. Like a key finally fitting into a lock that had been rusted shut for decades, Emma hugged Lily tighter, grateful for this moment of discovery they could share together. In the growing darkness outside their window, she could just make out Rex's faithful silhouette, still standing guard over the house that held so many secrets, secrets that, she now realized, were part of her own family's story. The handwriting on the note seemed to shimmer in the fading light. "Love, Mama C." A message that had traveled across time to connect 4 generations of women, Mrs. Callahan, Clara, Emma's mother, and now, Emma herself, sitting here with Lily. The next link in this chain of love and survival. The morning dawned clear and cool, with golden sunlight filtering through the autumn leaves. Emma stood at her front door, keys clutched tightly in her hand, watching Rex waiting patiently on her porch. After dropping Lily off at school, she'd driven straight home, her mind racing with possibilities about the connection between the letters and her family's past. "Ready, boy?" she asked softly. Rex's tail wagged once, his dark eyes fixed on her with an almost human understanding. Together, they crossed a street toward the abandoned house, fallen leaves crunching beneath their feet. The old house seemed different in the morning light, less threatening, more like a treasure chest waiting to be opened. Emma's hand trembled slightly as she pushed open the back door, which creaked on its rusty hinges. Rex trotted in ahead of her, his nails clicking against the wooden floors. Inside, dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight streaming through gaps in the boarded windows. Emma pulled out her flashlight, though she hardly needed it now. The morning light revealed details she'd missed during her nighttime visit: faded wallpaper with delicate flower patterns, picture hooks still mounted on walls, the ghost of a family's life lingering in every corner. Rex moved with purpose through the house, his nose working the floor. He stopped suddenly in what must have been the living room, pawing at a specific spot near the window. Emma knelt beside him, running her hands over the wooden floorboards. One board shifted slightly under her touch. "Good boy," she whispered, heart pounding as she worked her fingers around the edges. The board came loose more easily than she expected, revealing a small cavity beneath. Unlike the crawl space under the stairs, this hiding spot was more deliberate, more personal. Emma reached inside, her fingers brushing against something cool and metallic. She pulled out an oval-shaped locket, tarnished with age but still beautiful. Its surface was etched with delicate scrollwork, and though the clasp was stiff, it opened with a soft click. Inside, protected from time and dust, was a perfectly preserved photograph. Emma's breath caught in her throat. It showed the same little girl from the other photo, but younger here, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Her dark curls and bright eyes were hauntingly familiar, the same features Emma saw every time she looked at old photos of her grandmother. With shaking hands, Emma turned the locket over. There, engraved in flowing script that had withstood decades of silence, were the words that made her world shift on its axis. "To my little Clara, with all my love." Clara, her grandmother's name, had been Clara. The room seemed to spin around. Emma, as pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle, clicked into place. The letters, signed Mama C, the quilt with the initials, the mysterious circumstances of her grandmother's childhood that no one ever discussed. The way her grandmother had always loved German shepherds, keeping one until the day she died. Rex whined softly and pressed against her leg, offering comfort as tears began streaming down Emma's face. She clutched the locket to her chest, its metal warm now from her hands. Her grandmother, the kind, strong woman who had baked cookies every Sunday and told the best bedtime stories, had been Clara Callahan, the little girl who disappeared. The weight of this revelation pressed against Emma's chest. How many questions had gone unasked? How many answers had her grandmother carried to her grave? The woman who had helped raise Emma, who had taught her to garden and to bake and to always be kind to others, had once been the little girl from these letters, waiting for a mother who never returned. Emma sat back on her heels, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Rex rested his head on her knee, his presence steady and reassuring. Through her tears, she studied the photo in the locket again. The little girl, Clara, her grandmother, smiled out at her across the decades, innocent and unaware of how her life would unfold. The truth was undeniable now. Emma was holding physical proof of her family's connection to this house, to these letters, to the mysterious disappearance that had haunted the town for generations. Her grandmother had been Clara Callahan, and somehow, for reasons still unknown, she had never returned to this house or the mother who had loved her so dearly. The morning light continued to strengthen, illuminating the dust and decay around her, but Emma remained seated on the floor, tears flowing freely as she held this precious piece of her family's history. Rex stayed by her side, a faithful guardian just like his ancestors before him, watching over the descendants of the family he had been bred to protect. Emma sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by the letters, photographs, and the precious locket she'd discovered. Her laptop hummed softly as she carefully typed out the story for the local newspaper, the Valley Herald. She'd spent hours organizing her thoughts, wanting to do justice to the Callahan family's story. "How's the article coming, Mom?" Lily asked, peering over her shoulder at the screen. She held a glass of orange juice, carefully keeping it away from the precious documents spread across the table. "Almost done, sweetie," Emma replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I want to make sure I get everything right." She had titled the piece, "The Lost Callahans, a Mystery Solved After 50 Years. In the article, she carefully detailed how a German shepherd named Rex had led her to discover the truth about a family that had captured the town's imagination for decades. She described finding the letters that revealed Mrs. Callahan's heartbreaking situation, a widow trying to protect her daughter during difficult times after World War II. Emma included a photograph of the locket and the touching inscription, along with carefully chosen excerpts from the letters that showed Mrs. Callahan's deep love for her daughter, Clara. She explained how Clara hadn't vanished without a trace, as townspeople had believed, but had been sent to live with relatives for safety during a difficult time, relatives who later adopted her, leading to her becoming Emma's grandmother. "Do you think other people will care about this story as much as we do?" Lily asked, settling into the chair beside her mother. "I hope so, honey. It's not just about solving a mystery, it's about family and love, and how sometimes the truth can heal old wounds." The article was published the following Monday. Appearing on the front page of the local section, Emma hadn't expected the response that followed. Within days, her email inbox began filling with messages from people who had read the story. The most surprising emails came from the Callahan family's distant relatives. A second cousin twice removed, living in Oregon, had seen the article when it was shared online. She wrote about how her family had always wondered what had happened to their relatives in the old house. Another email came from Mrs. Callahan's nephew's children in Michigan, expressing amazement at finally understanding their family history. "Mom, look at this one," Lily exclaimed one evening, pointing to a new email that had just arrived. It was from a historian in Boston who specialized in post-World War II family histories. He praised Emma's research and offered to include the Callahan story in his upcoming book about families affected by the war. The most touching response came from an elderly woman named Margaret, living in Florida. She remembered being Clara's childhood friend before she was sent away. Her email brought tears to Emma's eyes as she described the kind little girl who had disappeared so suddenly from her life. As the sun began to set that evening, Emma and Lily stood on their front porch. The autumn air was crisp, and leaves rustled gently in the breeze. Lily carefully held a white candle in a glass holder, while Emma struck a match. "Why are we lighting a candle, Mom?" Lily asked as the flame caught and began to glow steadily. "To remember," Emma said softly, "to honor Mrs. Callahan and her love for Clara, to celebrate that their story isn't lost anymore." They looked across the street at the old house. Rex lay on the front lawn, his head resting on his paws, watching them with gentle eyes. The setting sun cast long shadows, but the house no longer seemed dark or forbidding. Instead, it stood as a silent witness to a mother's love, a daughter's journey, and a family's endurance. The windows that had once seemed to stare blankly now appeared to hold memories within their panes. The overgrown yard felt less like abandonment and more like a quiet garden of remembrance. Even the creaking of the old porch in the evening breeze sounded different, less like groans of despair and more like whispered stories of the past. "It's not scary anymore," Lily observed, watching the candle flame dance in the growing darkness. "No, it's not," Emma agreed, putting an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Now it's a place that reminds us that love never really gets lost. Sometimes it just takes a while to find its way home." The candle's warm glow reflected in their windows, creating a gentle beacon in the gathering dusk. Across the street, the old house stood peacefully, its secrets no longer hidden, but transformed into a legacy of love and remembrance that would be shared for generations to come. Rex lifted his head and gave a soft woof, as if adding his own approval to the moment. The breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance a church bell chimed the evening hour. The sound echoed through the quiet street, marking not an ending, but a gentle shift from mystery to memory, from loss to legacy, from darkness to light. Emma gently coaxed Rex into her car one sunny morning, his gray muzzle showing hints of age she hadn't noticed before. After everything they'd discovered about the Callahan family, she felt responsible for the faithful shepherd who had guided her through the mystery. The least she could do was have him checked by a veterinarian. "It's okay, boy," she soothed, scratching behind his ears as they pulled into the parking lot of Valley View Veterinary Clinic. The old dog seemed unusually calm, as if he knew he was in good hands. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and pet shampoo. Rex sat quietly by Emma's feet while she filled out paperwork, his intelligent eyes watching the door where other animals came and went. A young receptionist with kind eyes called them back to an examination room. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a veterinarian who'd been practicing in the town for over 20 years, entered with a warm smile. "So this is the famous Rex I've been hearing about," she said, kneeling to let Rex sniff her hand. "The whole town's talking about your article in the Herald." As Dr. Martinez examined Rex, she listened intently to Emma's story about finding the old photograph of the Callahan girl with the German Shepherd puppy. The vet's eyes lit up with recognition. "Wait right here," she said, disappearing into her office. She returned with an old leather-bound appointment book. "I inherited these records when I took over the practice from Dr. Thompson. He kept meticulous notes about every animal he treated." She carefully turned the yellowed pages, stopping at an entry from decades ago. "Here it is. The Callahan's shepherd, Max. And look at this." He documented the bloodline. "That dog had puppies that went to the Peterson family next door, and they continued breeding German shepherds for years." Emma leaned forward, fascinated. "So Rex could actually be a descendant of that original dog in your photograph?" "Almost certainly." Dr. Martinez showed her the detailed family tree Dr. Thompson had maintained. The Petersons were known for their shepherds, They kept careful breeding records and always made sure the puppies went to good homes in the area. According to this, Rex's mother was their last shepherd before they moved away 5 years ago. Emma watched Rex, who sat perfectly still during his examination. His noble profile so similar to the dog in the old photograph, but how did he end up at that house? German shepherds are known for their intelligence and incredible memory, Dr. Martinez explained, running her hands along Rex's spine. They can remember places and people for years. Sometimes they even pass down behaviors through generations. It's like an instinct, a genetic memory of sorts. The examination continued, with Dr. Martinez checking Rex's teeth, eyes, and joints. He's about 8 years old, and in remarkably good health considering he's been living rough. His previous owners must have taken good care of him before he found his way back to the Callahan house. Emma thought about Rex's unwavering vigil, how he'd led her to the hidden treasures that helped solve the mystery. It's almost like he knew what he was doing all along. Animals can surprise us with their depth of connection to places and people, Dr. Martinez said, making notes in Rex's new chart. He's been watching over that house like it was his sacred duty, just like his ancestors probably did for the Callahan family. After completing the examination, Dr. Martinez gave Rex some vaccines and provided Emma with heartworm medication. Have you considered giving him a permanent home? She asked gently. He clearly trusts you, and with your connection to the Callahan history, it seems meant to be. Emma hadn't said it out loud yet, but she'd been thinking about it ever since discovering the truth about her grandmother. I'd need to make sure his current owners aren't looking for him. The Petersons' neighbors took him in when they moved away, Dr. Martinez explained, but they said he kept running back to the Callahan house. Eventually, they just started leaving food out for him and checking on him. I'm sure they'd be relieved to know he's found a proper home. Emma filled out the adoption paperwork while Dr. Martinez explained proper care instructions. Rex watched them both, his tail wagging gently when Emma signed the final document making him officially part of their family. Lily's going to be so excited, Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. She could already imagine her daughter's joy at having Rex come live with them permanently. That evening, after sharing the happy news with an ecstatic Lily, Emma noticed something different about Rex. For the first time since she'd known him, he wasn't sitting in his usual spot across the street, staring at the abandoned house. Instead, he lay contentedly at her feet as she sat reading on the couch, his watchful duty finally complete. Lily sat on the floor next to him, gently stroking his fur. He knows he's home now, she said wisely, and Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. Rex lifted his head briefly to look at Emma, his brown eyes full of trust and affection. Then he sighed deeply and relaxed, truly at peace. The faithful guardian had found his new purpose, not in watching over an empty house full of memories, but in being part of a family that understood and honored those very memories he had helped preserve. Emma reached down to scratch his ears, remembering how this gentle dog had led her to discover her own family's hidden past. Now he would help them build new memories, a living link between the past and present, between the Callahans of yesterday and the family that carried their legacy forward today. The morning sun painted the sky in soft brush strokes of pink and gold as Emma, Lily, and Rex stood before the Callahan house. Spring had arrived early this year, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings. The old house looked different now, less foreboding, more welcoming. The winter's harsh grip had loosened, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the earth. Here's a good spot, Mom, Lily called out, kneeling in the soft dirt near the front porch. Her small hands worked eagerly with a trowel, digging holes for the bright yellow daffodils they'd brought. Rex sat nearby, his tail sweeping gentle arcs in the grass as he watched over his family. Emma smiled, remembering how this same yard had once seemed so mysterious and forbidding. Now, with morning dew glistening on new grass and birdsong filling the air, it felt like exactly where they were meant to be. She carried a flat of daffodil bulbs, their cheerful yellow heads nodding in the gentle breeze. Did you know daffodils mean rebirth? Emma asked, joining Lily on the ground. They're one of the first flowers to bloom after winter, bringing hope and new life. Just like our family story, Lily exclaimed, carefully placing a bulb in one of the holes she'd dug. It was hidden for so long, but now it's blooming again. Rex moved closer, sniffing the flowers with interest. His presence felt right, a living connection to the past. To the German shepherd puppy in that old photograph who had watched over another little girl so many years ago. He'd traded his vigilant post across the street for a new purpose, being part of their family, helping them restore what time had tried to hide. Together, they worked through the morning, planting dozens of daffodils along the front of the house. Emma showed Lily how to space them properly and cover them with just the right amount of soil. Their hands grew dirty, but their hearts felt light. Each flower they planted felt like a tribute to the Callahans, to Clara, who had grown up to become Emma's grandmother, to Mrs. Callahan, who had written those heartfelt letters never knowing if they'd be found. Neighbors walked by, smiling and waving at the sight of the family working together. The story of the Callahan mystery and its resolution had spread through town, touching hearts and healing old wounds. Some stopped to share memories of the house from years past, adding more pieces to the rich tapestry of its history. Mrs. Clark from the Historical Society paused on her morning walk, beaming at their handiwork. "Those daffodils are perfect," she said. Mrs. Callahan always loved yellow flowers. She used to say they reminded her of sunshine even on cloudy days. As the morning wore on, clouds began gathering overhead, their shadows dancing across the newly planted garden. But rather than darkening the mood, they seemed to make the yellow daffodils shine even brighter. Rex padded over to Emma, pressing against her leg in that comforting way he had. As if sensing her emotions, a shaft of sunlight suddenly broke through the clouds, illuminating the old house and their morning's work. Emma looked at the flowers, at Rex's faithful presence, at Lily's dirt-smudged face glowing with happiness. She thought about how this all began with a dog who wouldn't look away, whose unwavering stare had led them to uncover a truth buried for decades. The pieces of their family story had been scattered like puzzle pieces, waiting for someone to put them back together. It took a loyal dog's instinct, a child's curiosity, and a mother's determination to finally bring everything full circle. Emma reached out and took Lily's hand in hers, feeling overwhelmed by the beauty of their journey. "We're part of something bigger, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "Love always finds its way home." If today's story echoed in your heart, I hope you'll stick around. Subscribe, and I'll be here again tomorrow with another story that speaks softly but stays deeply.